Bullies savagely attack this 8-year-old girl at school, but they had no idea who her mother really was, and what happened next will leave you speechless. When little Emma Morrison came home from her first day at a new Nebraska school with a dark bruise on her face, her mother Rebecca thought it was just typical schoolyard bullying, until she discovered that the boy who attacked her daughter was the nephew of the town's most powerful man, and he had specifically targeted Emma because his uncle told him that her dead father was a traitor. But here's what's absolutely insane. Rebecca Morrison wasn't just any grieving military widow trying to start over in small-town America. She was a former Navy SEAL with 3 combat deployments who had moved to this quiet farming community specifically because her husband James had been murdered for uncovering a massive conspiracy, and now the same people who killed him were coming after her 8-year-old daughter. The bullying incident was actually a calculated message from a corrupt general and a wealthy developer who were running a weapons trafficking operation worth millions of dollars, and they thought they could intimidate a single mother into staying quiet about the evidence her husband died protecting. What these powerful men didn't realize was that James Morrison had prepared for exactly this scenario before his death, hiding military-grade equipment and classified intelligence in a secret bunker beneath their innocent-looking farmhouse, and that Rebecca had spent years as one of the military's deadliest operators before retiring to raise their daughter. When the school refused to punish Emma's attackers because of their family's political connections, when mysterious black SUVs started following them through town, when armed men began surrounding their property in the dead of night, Rebecca Morrison stopped being a grieving widow and became something these corrupt officials had never encountered before, a mother with nothing left to lose and the skills to take down an entire conspiracy. The evidence hidden on their property revealed Project Phoenix a treasonous operation involving stolen military technology, Pentagon officials, and foreign enemies, but the people running it made one fatal mistake. They threatened the wrong child, and now they were about to face the full fury of a Navy SEAL mother who would stop at nothing to protect her daughter and expose the truth about her husband's murder. Do you like this? Bullies savagely beat the girl on the street without imagining who her mother was. The September sun hung low over the Nebraska countryside, casting long shadows across the rolling hills of Hawthorne Valley as Rebecca Morrison guided her loaded pickup truck down the winding gravel road. Beside her, 8-year-old Emma stared out the passenger window with hollow blue eyes that had seen too much sorrow for someone so young. The past 3 months had aged them both in ways that no calendar could measure. "Is this really going to be home, Mom?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, carrying the fragility that had replaced her once vibrant spirit since the funeral. Rebecca's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she navigated around a particularly deep pothole. "Yes, sweetheart, this is our fresh start." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Fresh start. As if anything could truly be fresh after burying your husband at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, after watching them fold that flag with mechanical precision and hand it to you with rehearsed sympathy. After learning that Captain James Morrison's death had been classified as a training accident that left no body intact enough for an open casket. The farmhouse came into view as they crested the final hill, and Rebecca felt her breath catch. The 2-story white structure sat like a weathered sentinel in the midst of 200 acres of fertile Nebraska farmland, its wraparound porch sagging slightly at one corner, but still maintaining an air of dignified endurance. Behind it, a large red barn stood watch over fields that stretched toward the distant horizon. "It's so big," Emma whispered, and for the first time in months, Rebecca heard something other than grief in her daughter's voice. Wonder, perhaps, or maybe just surprise. "Room to breathe," Rebecca replied, reaching across to squeeze Emma's small hand. "Room to heal." They pulled up to the house, gravel crunching beneath their tires. Rebecca cut the engine and sat for a moment, absorbing the profound silence. After years of military bases with their constant activity and the suburban chaos near Fort Bragg where they'd lived during James's stateside assignments, the quiet was almost disorienting. "What do we do now?" Emma asked, her eyes searching her mother's face with that heartbreaking earnestness that children possess when their world has been shattered. Rebecca forced herself to smile, though it felt like lifting weights. "We unpack. We make it home." They were halfway up the wooden steps to the porch when movement at the edge of the property caught Rebecca's attention. Her hand instinctively moved toward her hip, where her service weapon would have been during her active duty days. Old habits died hard, especially when they'd kept you alive through 3 combat tours in the Middle East. An ancient Ford pickup truck rumbled down the dirt road that bordered their property, slowing as it approached. Rebecca positioned herself between the vehicle and Emma, her posture shifting into the hyper-alert stance that had become second nature during her years as a Navy SEAL. Every sense heightened, every potential threat assessed and catalogued. The truck came to a stop, and an elderly man emerged. He was tall despite his advanced years, with a shock of white hair and a deeply lined face that spoke of decades under the harsh Midwestern sun. He wore faded overalls over a red flannel shirt and moved with the careful deliberation of someone managing old injuries. "You must be the new owners," he called out, maintaining a respectful distance that Rebecca noted with approval. This man understood personal space and the importance of not appearing threatening to strangers. "I'm Walter Hayes," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward a roofline visible about a mile to the east. "Your neighbor over that way." Rebecca Morrison," she replied, not moving from her protective stance. "This is my daughter, Emma." Walter nodded, his keen eyes taking in the moving truck, the tense set of Rebecca's shoulders, and the hollow-eyed child half hidden behind her mother. Rebecca watched him process these details with the sharp attention of someone accustomed to reading situations quickly and accurately. "Well, Mrs. Morrison," Walter said, reaching slowly into his truck bed and lifting out a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I brought you something, my late wife's recipe. Figured moving day calls for something home-cooked." The scent of freshly baked bread reached them as he approached, and Rebecca felt Emma relax slightly behind her. It was such a normal gesture, so wonderfully ordinary after months of sympathy casseroles and awkward condolences from well-meaning neighbors who didn't know what to say to a young widow and her grieving child. "That's very kind, Mr. Hayes," Rebecca said, some of the military rigidity leaving her posture. "Just Walter," he corrected with a gentle smile, setting the basket on the porch railing. "Nobody's called me Mr. Hayes since I mustered out in '48. Rebecca's assessment of the man shifted instantly. Military, the way he carried himself, the respectful distance, the careful movements, it all made sense now. "You served?" she asked, though it was more statement than question. Something passed between them then, a recognition that transcended generations and branch of service. An understanding that only existed between those who had worn the uniform and carried the weight of protecting others. "Army 101st Airborne," Walter replied, his weathered face creasing in a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jumped into Normandy, but that's ancient history." He glanced down at Emma, who was peering around her mother with cautious curiosity. Probably not appropriate mealtime conversation for a young lady. Rebecca nodded, feeling the first genuine moment of connection she'd experienced since leaving North Carolina. "Would you like to come in? We haven't set up much, but I can offer coffee." Walter shook his head politely. "Another time. You folks need to get settled first, but if you need anything, directions, recommendations, or just want to know which of the locals to avoid..." He paused with a knowing look. "I'm just down the road." As he turned to leave, he stopped, and looked back at Rebecca with eyes that had seen their share of battles and loss. "Hawthorne Valley is a good place to start over, Mrs. Morrison. Quiet people who mind their own business." His gaze sharpened slightly. "Most people, anyway." After Walter's truck disappeared down the road, Rebecca and Emma carried the basket inside. The house smelled of age and memories, but it was clean and structurally sound. Beneath the checkered cloth, they found warm bread still fragrant from the oven, homemade strawberry jam, and a handwritten note with Walter's phone number. "Is he a friend now?" Emma asked, tearing off a piece of the still warm bread. Rebecca stared out the window at the dust settling on the empty road. "Maybe," she said carefully. "We could use one." The rest of the day was spent in the familiar chaos of moving, boxes to unpack, furniture to arrange, and the million small decisions that turn a house into a home. Emma seemed to brighten as they worked, particularly when they set up her bedroom in what had once been a child's room, complete with built-in shelves and a window seat overlooking the fields. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep in her new bed clutching the stuffed rabbit that had been James's last gift to her, Rebecca made her way down to the basement. The previous owner had left it unfinished. Bare concrete floors, exposed beams, and the musty smell of a space that had been neglected for years. Perfect for what she had in mind. Moving to a corner where she'd done some preliminary work during her pre-purchase inspection, Rebecca pried up several floorboards to reveal a metal footlocker she'd hidden there. Inside lay the tools of her former trade. A disassembled M24A2 sniper rifle, her modified Colt 45 ACP, an anniversary gift from James, and several other items that various government agencies would be very interested to know were in civilian hands. Rebecca removed the handgun, checking its action with practiced efficiency before loading it. The weight was familiar, comforting in its lethality. She might not be an active SEAL anymore, hadn't been since Emma was born, but some skills, some instincts, never faded. They just went dormant, waiting for the moment when they might be needed again. She secured the weapon in a hidden compartment she'd installed beneath the kitchen sink, then made her way upstairs. Pausing in Emma's doorway, she watched her daughter's chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep, marveling at how untroubled she looked in slumber. "I'll keep you safe," Rebecca whispered to the darkness, "whatever it takes." She couldn't save James, but she would protect their daughter, even if it meant becoming the very thing she'd spent years fighting against. The next morning brought their first venture into the nearby town of Milbrook, announced by a faded billboard proclaiming it Nebraska's best-kept secret since 1867. The peeling paint and rusting supports suggested the secret remained well kept indeed. Rebecca drove slowly down Main Street, cataloging details with the automatic assessment that was part training, part instinct. The town square was anchored by the usual suspects: a hardware store, a diner called Maggie's Place, a small supermarket, and the inevitable dollar store. A brick building with an American flag hanging limp in the still air bore signs identifying it as both the town hall and sheriff's department. "Can we get ice cream?" Emma asked, pointing to a small parlor with a striped awning. "After we get groceries," Rebecca promised, pulling into the supermarket's gravel parking lot. Inside, the store was clean but dated, with linoleum floors that had seen better decades and fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical inefficiency. Rebecca guided Emma through the narrow aisles, filling their cart with essentials while noting the curious glances from other shoppers. Small towns. Everyone noticed newcomers, and speculation would be running rampant by evening. At the checkout, the middle-aged cashier smiled warmly as she began scanning their items. Her name tag read, Martha. "You must be the folks who bought the old Patterson place," Martha said conversationally. Rebecca nodded, unsurprised by the speed of small-town information networks. "News travels fast." It's about the only thing that does around here, Martha laughed, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm Martha, by the way. My husband Frank and I own this place. Rebecca Morrison. This is my daughter, Emma. Martha's expression softened as she looked at Emma, who was staying close to her mother's side. Well, welcome to Milbrook, honey. We've got a good school here, you know. Mrs. Patterson teaches 4th grade, and she's just wonderful with children. Emma managed a shy smile, but remained pressed against Rebecca's side. Speaking of school, Rebecca said, where would I go to get her registered? Town Hall has all the forms, Martha replied, continuing to scan their groceries. Sheriff Cross can point you in the right direction. His office is right there too. As if summoned by his name, the door chimed and a tall man in a tan sheriff's uniform entered. He moved with easy confidence, his weathered face serious beneath regulation short salt and pepper hair. Rebecca immediately recognized the bearing, law enforcement with military background, the same way she could spot a fellow veteran in civilian clothes. Martha waved him over. Robert, come meet our newest residents. Sheriff Robert Cross approached with measured steps, his keen gray eyes taking in Rebecca with the professional assessment she recognized and respected. Sheriff Robert Cross, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Rebecca Morrison, she replied, noting his firm grip and direct gaze. My daughter Emma. Patterson Farm, right? Cross asked. Good piece of land. Needs some work, though. We're up for the challenge, Rebecca assured him. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. Town's quiet, Mrs. Morrison. We like it that way. So do we, Rebecca said. That's why we're here. Something flickered in his expression, not quite suspicion, but a reserved judgment that suggested he was withholding final opinion until he knew more about these newcomers. Well, if you need anything, my office is across the street, Cross said. Doors always open. As they loaded groceries into the truck, Rebecca noticed the sheriff watching them from the store window, his posture alert despite his casual stance. Professional interest or something more? Time would tell. Mom, Emma said suddenly, tugging on Rebecca's sleeve, who's that man staring at us? Rebecca followed her daughter's gaze to a sleek black Cadillac Escalade parked down the street. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit leaned against it, making no effort to hide his interest in them. Even from a distance, Rebecca could see the calculating look in his eyes, the predatory assessment of someone evaluating potential prey. I don't know, Rebecca replied, keeping her voice casual while mentally recording every detail of his appearance. But it's not polite to stare back. She secured Emma in the passenger seat, then approached the ice cream parlor, positioning herself to keep the man in her peripheral vision. He straightened as she passed, smoothing his tie with manicured hands. Mrs. Morrison, he called out, his voice cultured and confident. A moment of your time? Rebecca paused, maintaining distance. Do I know you? Not yet. His smile revealed teeth too white and perfect to be natural. Richard Sterling. I own Sterling Development. He extended a business card which Rebecca didn't take. I've been acquiring property in the area, Sterling continued, his tone suggesting this should impress her. Creating opportunities for growth and development. I'm not selling, Mr. Sterling, Rebecca said flatly. His smile didn't waver, but something cold entered his eyes. I haven't made an offer yet. Save yourself the trouble. Sterling straightened his already immaculate jacket. The Patterson property has significant potential, Mrs. Morrison. I'm prepared to be very generous. And I'm prepared to be very clear, Rebecca replied, her voice taking on the controlled edge that had made her effective in high-stress situations. The farm isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. There was a calculated pause before Sterling spoke again. Things change, Mrs. Morrison. Especially in this economy. His gaze flicked toward Emma, visible through the truck's windshield. Farming isn't easy. even for established operations, let alone for newcomers with no experience. The implicit threat wasn't lost on Rebecca. She stepped closer, entering his personal space with the controlled aggression that had served her well in close-quarters situations. "Let me be perfectly clear, Mr. Sterling," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "I bought that land to give my daughter stability after losing her father. We're not leaving, not for any price, and I don't appreciate implied threats against my family." For just an instant, Sterling's professional mask slipped, revealing something harder and more dangerous underneath. Then the pleasant expression returned. "No threats, Mrs. Morrison. Just economic reality." He stepped back, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "We'll speak again." Rebecca watched his Escalade disappear down Main Street, memorizing the license plate number automatically. Everything about Sterling had triggered her threat assessment systems. The casual confidence, the implied power, the calculated intimidation tactics. This was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted by whatever means necessary. True to her promise, they stopped for ice cream before heading home. Emma chose chocolate with sprinkles, her spirits lifting momentarily at the simple pleasure. Rebecca treasured these glimpses of her daughter's former self, knowing they were becoming more precious with each passing day. "Do you think school will be okay?" Emma asked as they drove, licking her cone with the focused attention that children brought to ice cream. Rebecca chose her words carefully. "It might be a little strange at first, being the new kid, but you'll make friends, good friends, like Mr. Walter." Emma was quiet for a moment, watching the landscape roll by. "Dad would have liked the farm," she said finally. Rebecca's throat tightened. Yes, he would have. They were almost home when Rebecca noticed a black sedan parked off the county road, partially hidden by a stand of cottonwood trees. Unmarked, but the license plates and the way it sat motionless in the growing dusk triggered every alarm bell in her system. "Everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked, noting the sudden tension in her mother's posture. Rebecca forced her expression to remain neutral. "Just fine, sweetie. Just fine." But as they turned into their driveway, Rebecca was already planning security measures to implement, escape routes to establish, weapons caches to prepare. The peaceful refuge she'd sought for Emma might already be compromised, but she'd be damned if she'd let anyone drive them from their home. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Rebecca made another trip to the basement. This time, she began the serious work of preparing their defenses. Hidden cameras around the property perimeter, motion sensors on the access roads, secure communication equipment, and most importantly, a thorough survey of the house and grounds for anything unusual. It was during this survey that she made the discovery that would change everything. In the barn, while checking for the best positions to install surveillance equipment, Rebecca noticed something odd about the dirt floor in one of the rear stalls. It was too level, too uniform compared to the packed earth elsewhere. Moving closer, she knelt and brushed away the surface layer of soil. Beneath was concrete, not unusual in itself, but this concrete had seams, edges that suggested it wasn't part of the original foundation. Rebecca's pulse quickened as she cleared more dirt, revealing what appeared to be a concealed trap door. There was no visible handle, but when she applied pressure to one edge, the opposite side rose slightly, revealing a recessed grip. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, Rebecca pulled. The door opened silently on hydraulic hinges, revealing a metal ladder descending into darkness. Rebecca retrieved a flashlight from her equipment bag and peered down. Approximately 15 feet below was a concrete chamber that extended beneath a significant portion of the barn floor. The space was a revelation. Military-grade communications equipment lined one wall, weapons storage, surveillance monitors, a compact but comprehensive operations center. This wasn't just a storm shelter or root cellar. This was a professional facility designed for extended operations. Rebecca descended the ladder, her heart pounding as the implications became clear. James had suggested this property, had spoken of its good bones. She'd thought he meant renovation potential, but now she understood. He'd known about this bunker. Somehow he'd known. Against the far wall stood a desk with a locked metal case. Rebecca approached it carefully, noting the sophisticated biometric lock, fingerprint and retinal scanners. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed her thumb to the reader. The light flashed red. Access denied. Then she leaned forward, positioning her eye before the retinal scanner. The lock clicked open. James had programmed it to recognize her. He'd planned for her to find this place. Inside the case was a laptop computer, several external hard drives, and a sealed envelope with her name written in James's distinctive block lettering. With trembling hands, Rebecca opened it. "Rebecca, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. More sorry than words can express for what this means for you and Emma. What I discovered goes deeper than I ever imagined. Weapons technology being sold to hostile foreign interests, classified intelligence compromised, military personnel at the highest levels involved in systematic treason. And when I got too close to the truth, they decided I was a problem that needed to be solved. Everything is on the drives. Names, dates, transactions, financial records. Enough evidence to bring down the entire network. But be careful who you trust with this information. The corruption reaches into every agency, every branch of government. There are very few people who can't be bought or intimidated. I established this facility as a secure base of operations completely off the books. No one knows about it except you now. Use it if you need to. The equipment is military grade, communications are encrypted, and there's enough weapons and supplies for extended operations. Tell Emma I love her more than anything in this world. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise to always come home. And Rebecca, I know you. Don't let this consume you with thoughts of revenge. Focus on justice instead. There's a difference, and Emma needs you to remember that. All my love, always." James. Rebecca clutched the letter to her chest as tears streamed down her face. For the first time since the notification officers had appeared at her door with their formal condolences and official regrets, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief and rage. James hadn't died in a training accident. He'd been murdered by the very people he'd sworn to serve and protect. After several minutes, she wiped her eyes and turned to the laptop. It powered on immediately, prompting for biometric authentication. Again, it recognized her credentials. James had been thorough in his preparations. The screen filled with files, hundreds of them. Surveillance photographs, financial records, shipping manifests, communication intercepts, and most damning of all, names. So many names, including several she recognized from the highest levels of military command and government service. One folder was labeled simply Sterling. Rebecca opened it with growing dread. Inside was extensive documentation on Richard Sterling and his development company, property acquisitions, shell corporations, offshore financial accounts, and something called Project Phoenix. As she scrolled through the files, a surveillance photograph filled the screen. Sterling shaking hands with a distinguished-looking man in military uniform, General Martin Crawford, James's former commanding officer, the man who had signed off on the report classifying James's death as a training accident. The pieces began falling into place with horrifying clarity. The land acquisitions forming a corridor from the interstate to the state line, the black sedan following her, the immediate interest in her property from Sterling. This wasn't just about selling stolen weapons technology, it was about establishing a permanent pipeline for ongoing operations. And the Patterson farm sat squarely in the middle of their planned route. A sound from above jerked Rebecca from her thoughts, the crunch of tires on gravel. Someone was on the property. She quickly shut down the laptop, secured it in the case, and climbed the ladder. After carefully closing the trapdoor and spreading fresh dirt over it, she exited the barn through the rear door, moving silently through the shadows toward the house. An old pickup truck was parked near the front porch, Walter's truck. Rebecca approached cautiously, hand instinctively moving toward her concealed weapon. Walter stood on the porch, speaking quietly with Emma through the screen door. "Rebecca," he called, spotting her approach. "Hope you don't mind the intrusion. Brought over some fresh vegetables from my garden. Too much for just me." She relaxed slightly, though her system remained on high alert. "That's very kind of you, Walter." "Least I could do," he said, gesturing to a basket on the porch swing. "Sweet corn, tomatoes, some zucchini. They grow like weeds this time of year." Rebecca invited him in for coffee, watching closely for any sign that his friendly neighbor act was exactly that, an act. But Walter seemed genuine, settling into their kitchen like he belonged there, accepting coffee with the easy gratitude of someone who appreciated simple kindnesses. "How's Emma settling in?" he asked, noting that she disappeared upstairs, probably to her room. "As well as can be expected," Rebecca replied carefully. "It's been a difficult year." Walter's keen eyes studied her face. "Lost her father recently." Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "Military?" he asked gently. "Army, Special Forces, training accident according to the official report." Walter was quiet for a long moment, absorbing both what she'd said and what she hadn't. "I'm sorry for your loss, and for the doubt I hear in your voice about that official report." Rebecca looked up sharply. "I didn't say anything about doubt." "Didn't have to," Walter replied. "I've been around long enough to recognize the signs. The way you carry yourself, always aware of exits and sightlines, the way you assessed me as a potential threat when I showed up, the fact that you chose this particular property in this particular valley." He leaned forward slightly. "You're not just a grieving widow looking for a fresh start, are you, Rebecca?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. She studied his weathered face, weighing options and risks. Finally, she made a decision. "Navy," she said simply. "Special operations, retired when Emma was born." Walter nodded slowly. "Thought so. Takes one to know one, as they say." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "And now you're wondering if your husband's death was really an accident." "I'm wondering a lot of things," Rebecca admitted, "including whether Richard Sterling's interest in your property is connected to those doubts." Rebecca's hand stilled on her coffee mug. "You know about Sterling's offer?" Walter's smile was grim. Small town, word travels fast. Plus, Sterling's been buying up properties for about a year now. Folks who refuse to sell tend to experience unfortunate circumstances, equipment failures, accidents, livestock disappearing. Nothing that can be directly traced back to him, but the pattern is clear enough. "You seem to know a lot about Mr. Sterling's business practices," Rebecca observed. "I make it my business to know what happens in my valley," Walter replied. "Been here 50 years, seen people come and go. Sterling isn't just developing land, Rebecca. He's developing infrastructure, the kind used for moving things discreetly from point A to point B without going through normal channels." The echo of her own suspicion sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. "What kind of things?" Walter's expression grew serious. "That's the question that got the previous owner of your property very interested in Sterling development, right before he suddenly decided to sell and move to Arizona for his health." Rebecca felt the world shifting beneath her feet. The previous owner was investigating Sterling. Colonel David Patterson, retired Army intelligence, moved here about 2 years ago, seemed to be enjoying his retirement. Then Sterling started buying up properties around his farm, and Patterson began asking questions. Good questions about shell companies and offshore financing, and why a small-time developer needed such sophisticated logistics capabilities. What happened to him? Walter's eyes were hard. Officially. Heart attack. Unofficially. A man who'd survived 3 tours in Vietnam and 20 years in military intelligence doesn't just drop dead from a heart attack at 62, especially not when he was in excellent health and training for a marathon. Rebecca absorbed this information, feeling pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You think Sterling had him killed? I think Colonel Patterson discovered something that made him a liability, Walter said carefully. Just like I think your husband discovered something that made him a liability. The implications were staggering. If Walter was right, then James's investigation hadn't been an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern, and she and Emma were now in the crosshairs of the same people who had killed both men. Walter, Rebecca said slowly, what exactly did Colonel Patterson discover about Sterling's operation? The old soldier met her gaze directly. That's what we need to figure out. Together. Because whatever it was, it's still buried somewhere on your property. And sooner or later, Sterling's going to come looking for it. Outside, the September night was growing darker, and somewhere in the distance, Rebecca thought she heard the sound of vehicles on the county road. More surveillance or something worse. Time would tell. But as she sat across from Walter Hayes, this unexpected ally, who understood both the stakes and the game they were now playing, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced since James's death. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who believed in fairy tale endings, but the tactical hope of a professional who recognized that she wasn't alone in this fight. Tomorrow, Emma would start school. Tomorrow, Rebecca would begin her own investigation into Sterling Development and Project Phoenix. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. But tonight, for the first time since coming to Hawthorne Valley, Rebecca Morrison felt like she might actually have a chance of winning. Emma's first day at Milbrook Elementary arrived with the crisp promise of early September. Rebecca helped her daughter choose an outfit, packed her lunch with extra care, and tried to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel as they drove toward town. "Remember, I'll pick you up at 3:15 sharp," Rebecca said as they pulled up to the single-story brick building. "Right out front." Emma nodded, clutching her new backpack with white-knuckled determination. "What if the other kids don't like me?" "Be yourself. The right friends will find you." Rebecca tucked a strand of hair behind Emma's ear. "And Emma? It's okay to have fun. Dad would want that." A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips before she squared her small shoulders and marched toward the building, each step a small victory over fear. Rebecca watched until she disappeared inside, then drove toward the outskirts of town for an errand she'd been postponing. The Milbrook Community Bank occupied a stately brick building on Main Street, its interior updated to modern standards while preserving historical details. As Rebecca filled out new account forms at the customer service desk, she became aware of someone watching her. A security guard stood by the entrance, his posture military straight despite the civilian uniform. Something about his stance, the way his eyes swept the room in calculated patterns, triggered her recognition. This wasn't just any rent-a-cop. This was former military, special operations if she had to guess. When their eyes met across the lobby, recognition flashed between them like lightning. Micro-expressions that most civilians would miss entirely, but that spoke volumes to those trained to read them. Tony Rodriguez. Rebecca hadn't seen him since James's funeral, hadn't expected to see him ever again, especially not in this backwater Nebraska town, wearing a security guard uniform that had to be the ultimate insult for a man who'd spent 15 years in Delta Force. The coincidence was too great to be chance. Rebecca finished her paperwork with mechanical efficiency, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. As she approached the exit, Tony stepped forward. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said formally, extending a business card. Rebecca accepted it, noting the handwritten message on the back. "Secure line. Urgent. Contact me." "Thank you," she replied, their eyes meeting again in silent communication. "Have a nice day," Tony said, returning to his post as if nothing had happened. Rebecca tucked the card into her pocket and left, her skin prickling with the certainty that her carefully constructed new beginning was already unraveling. That afternoon, she waited outside the school with growing anxiety. When the final bell rang and children streamed out in noisy groups, Emma wasn't among them. 5 minutes passed, 10. Rebecca approached the entrance, tension coiling in her muscles like a spring. Inside, she found Nancy Patterson in the hallway, looking concerned. "Rebecca," Nancy said, relief evident in her voice. "I was just about to call you. There was an incident at recess." Fear spiked through Rebecca's chest. "Where's Emma?" "In my classroom." "She's all right, just upset." Rebecca followed Nancy to the classroom where she found Emma sitting alone, staring at her hands. A bruise was forming on her cheek, dark purple against her pale skin. "Emma!" Rebecca rushed forward, kneeling before her daughter. "What happened?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Tyler Sterling said I didn't belong here, that we should go back where we came from. He said—" She hiccuped, struggling with the words. "He said his uncle told him that Dad was a traitor." Cold fury rose in Rebecca's throat. She looked to Nancy for explanation. "Tyler Sterling is Richard Sterling's nephew," Nancy said quietly. "He and 2 other boys surrounded Emma during recess. When she tried to leave, Tyler pushed her. She fell and hit her face on the playground equipment." "And where is Tyler now?" Rebecca's voice was deadly calm. "His uncle picked him up early. Apparently he had a dental appointment." Nancy's tone made it clear she didn't believe the excuse. Rebecca gently tilted Emma's chin, examining the bruise. "Did the school nurse see this?" "Yes, she applied ice and documented the injury," Nancy assured her. "And Rebecca, I want you to know I've already filed a disciplinary report. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable." "Will anything come of it?" Rebecca asked, already suspecting the answer. Nancy's hesitation was confirmation enough. "Tyler's father is on the school board, and his uncle, well, he donates significantly to the school's budget each year. The politics were clear. Money protected its own, and 8-year-old girls were acceptable casualties." "Thank you for looking out for her," Rebecca said, helping Emma gather her things. As they walked to the truck, Rebecca kept her arm around Emma's shoulders, fury building with each step. They were targeting a child to send a message. The rules of engagement had just changed dramatically. "I'm sorry, Mom," Emma whispered as they climbed into the truck. Rebecca felt her heart crack. "For what, sweetheart?" "For causing trouble. Maybe we should move again." "No!" Rebecca's voice was firm. "We are not running. This is our home now, and no one is going to drive us away. Especially not bullies like Tyler Sterling." That evening, after Emma was asleep, Rebecca parked behind an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town and dialed the number Tony had given her. He answered on the first ring. "Secure line," he said, without preamble. "What are you doing here, Tony?" Rebecca demanded. "Could ask you the same thing." His voice was tight, controlled. "Of all places, why here? You know why." "Fresh start, away from everything." "Not as away as you think, Rebecca." There was a pause. "I need to see you. Tonight. The old grain silo off County Road 27. 1 hour." The line went dead. The silo stood abandoned in a field of waist-high grass, rust bleeding down its metal sides like old wounds. Rebecca approached cautiously, scanning for surveillance and finding none. Tony emerged from the shadow of the structure as she drew near. Up close, he looked older than he had at the funeral. New lines around his eyes, a weariness in his posture that spoke of months of stress and sleepless nights, but his gaze was sharp, alert, dangerous. "You're being watched," he said without greeting. "By who?" "You." "Not just me." Tony glanced around, habit rather than immediate concern. "James was on to something before he died, Rebecca. Something big." Rebecca's breath caught. The training accident wasn't an accident. It wasn't a question, but Tony nodded anyway. He was investigating a leak. Classified weapons technology being sold to foreign interests, high-level stuff, bleeding-edge military hardware. "And you think his death was connected?" "I know it was." Tony's voice hardened. "He contacted me the night before, said he'd identified the source, that he was sending you insurance." Rebecca's mind raced. "I never received anything." "You sure about that?" Tony studied her face. "No packages, no messages, nothing out of the ordinary?" "Nothing." She started to shake her head, then stopped. "Wait, the farm. James suggested it, said it had good bones for what we needed. I thought he meant renovation potential." Understanding dawned in Tony's expression. He hid something there, something worth killing for. "And now someone's watching to see if I find it." "Sterling Development isn't just buying land, Rebecca," Tony said. "They're building infrastructure. The kind perfect for moving contraband across borders without scrutiny." Rebecca thought of Sterling's expensive suit, his calculated smile, the cold threat in his eyes when she'd refused his offer. "You think he's connected to James's death?" "I think," Tony said carefully, "that nothing in this town is what it seems, including the accident that landed me here 3 weeks before you arrived." The implications settled over Rebecca like a shroud. Her fresh start, her safe haven for Emma, all potentially compromised from the beginning. "What now?" she asked, falling back on tactical thinking to keep the rising panic at bay. "We find what James hid before they do." Tony's expression softened slightly. "And Rebecca?" "I'm sorry about all of it. James was the best of us." She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. "I'll be in touch," Tony said. "Stay alert. Trust no one." The next morning brought Emma's return to school and Rebecca's first meeting with Sheriff Cross. She found him in his office looking up from paperwork with mild surprise. "Mrs. Morrison, what can I do for you?" "Call me Rebecca," she said, taking the seat across from his desk. "I wanted to ask about Richard Sterling." Cross set down his pen, his expression carefully neutral. "What about him?" "He approached me yesterday, seemed very interested in my property. Sterling's interested in most property around here. Been buying up farms, undeveloped land. Says he's building the future of Milbrook. And damn, what do you think he's building?" The sheriff studied her for a long moment. "Why the interest, Rebecca?" She met his gaze directly. "Because he implied things might get difficult for me if I don't sell." "I don't respond well to threats, however veiled." Cross leaned back, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Sterling's powerful. Has the mayor and half the town council in his pocket, but he operates within the law." A slight emphasis on the last words. "Officially and unofficially." "Unofficially, I'd say a single mother with no local connections might think twice about making an enemy of the richest man in 3 counties. He leaned forward. "But something tells me you're not easily intimidated." Rebecca allowed a small smile. "I've faced worse than rich men with entitlement issues." "I don't doubt it." Cross stood, moving to a filing cabinet. "Sterling Development has purchased 16 properties in the last year." He spread a map on the desk, certain areas highlighted in red. "Notice anything?" Rebecca studied the pattern. "They form a corridor, from the interstate to the state line." Cross nodded. "Perfect for moving goods without going through town or major checkpoints." He folded the map. "Your property sits right in the middle of his planned route. You've been investigating him. Let's just say I've been paying attention." Cross returned to his seat. But Sterling has friends in high places, the kind that make evidence disappear and investigations stall. Rebecca absorbed this information, weighing her options. If someone wanted to document suspicious activity around Sterling's properties, hypothetically, Cross interrupted, such documentation would need to be comprehensive, incontrovertible, and it would need to come from someone whose credibility couldn't be easily undermined. He fixed her with a meaningful look. A tentative alliance, then? Rebecca nodded, standing to leave. Hypothetically, Sheriff, I've always been thorough in my documentation. As she reached the door, Cross called after her. Rebecca, be careful. Sterling doesn't like losing. Neither do I, she replied. Over the next week, Rebecca began her surveillance operation in earnest. Using the equipment from James's hidden bunker, she established observation posts at key locations around Sterling's properties. What she discovered confirmed her worst suspicions, and then some. The first property on her list was a former dairy farm about 5 miles outside town. Sterling development signs announced future commercial use, but the security measures were far beyond anything needed for a legitimate development project. Razor wire topped the new fencing, military-grade cameras covered every approach, and the guards patrolling the perimeter carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of former special operations personnel. Rebecca observed from a concealed position for 3 hours, documenting everything. 2 black SUVs arrived during her watch, followed by a cargo truck with unmarked containers. Sterling himself appeared briefly, staying exactly 22 minutes before departing in his silver Escalade. She photographed it all, including close-ups of the license plates and, when possible, the faces of the security personnel. Every detail might prove crucial later. The second location yielded similar intelligence, excessive security for a supposed agricultural equipment distribution center. Heavy vehicle traffic at odd hours, armed personnel attempting to look like construction workers but failing to disguise their military training. It was at the third site that Rebecca hit pay dirt. The warehouse sat near the state line, officially listed as a grain storage facility. But grain storage facilities didn't typically require armed guards or have loading docks designed for military vehicles. As Rebecca watched through her telephoto lens, a cargo container was unloaded from a truck with out-of-state plates. The workers briefly opened it to verify contents, giving Rebecca a clear view of wooden crates marked with military shipping codes. She'd seen similar containers during her deployments. They typically held weapons, ammunition, or sensitive equipment. Rebecca documented everything. The shipping codes visible on the crates, the license plates of the vehicles, the faces of everyone involved in the operation. The evidence was mounting piece by piece, but it was her conversation with Nancy Patterson that provided the final piece of the puzzle she needed. There's something I need to tell you, Nancy said after school one day, her voice tense with suppressed emotion, about why I really came to Milbrook. They were sitting in Nancy's classroom while Emma played quietly in the corner, drawing pictures of the farm. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the children's desks. My sister disappeared 6 months ago, Nancy continued. She was working as an administrative assistant at Sterling Development. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Disappeared how? Lisa was always curious, always asking questions. She started noticing discrepancies in the company's financial records, shipments that didn't match the paperwork, meetings that weren't on the official calendar, payments to companies that didn't seem to exist. What happened? Nancy's hands clenched into fists on the desk. She called me the night before she vanished. Said she'd found something big, something dangerous, that she was scared and didn't know who to trust. Her voice cracked slightly. The next morning she didn't show up for work. That evening her car was found at the bus station with a ticket to Denver in her purse. But she never arrived there, and she's never contacted family or friends. You think Sterling was involved? I know he was. Nancy's voice hardened. That's why I took this teaching position, to try to find out what happened to her. Sheriff Cross has been helping, but without evidence. The official investigation was closed. Ruled a voluntary disappearance. Adult woman, no signs of foul play, ticket purchased with her own credit card. Case closed. Nancy looked directly at Rebecca. But I know my sister. She would never just disappear without a word, especially not when she was trying to expose something important. Another piece of the conspiracy clicked into place. Sterling wasn't just running a smuggling operation, he was eliminating anyone who got too close to discovering it. Nancy, Rebecca said carefully, I might be able to help. I'm looking into Sterling myself for related reasons. I thought you might be. Nancy's expression showed a mix of hope and wariness. The way you carry yourself, the questions you've been asking. You're not just a grieving widow looking for a quiet place to raise her daughter. Rebecca made a calculated decision. I have reason to believe Sterling's operation was responsible for my husband's death. And now they're threatening Emma. Nancy nodded slowly. Then we're on the same side. People like Sterling think they can do whatever they want, hurt whoever gets in their way. They need to be stopped. There's something else, Nancy added. I've been hearing rumors about some kind of meeting at Sterling's estate. Important people from out of town, including military personnel. When? Soon. Tyler Sterling has been bragging to his classmates about the big shots coming to his uncle's party, including someone he called the General. General Crawford. The pieces were falling into place with frightening clarity. That evening, Rebecca descended into James's bunker and began compiling everything she'd discovered. Surveillance photos, financial records from James's files, her own intelligence on Sterling's properties. It was forming a comprehensive picture of a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of government and military command. The communications equipment crackled to life as she worked. Someone was transmitting on encrypted military frequencies, and the signal was coming from inside Milbrook. Rebecca donned headphones and began scanning channels, her training in electronic warfare serving her well. After several minutes, she locked onto a conversation between two voices she didn't recognize. Package arrives tomorrow night. Crawford wants everything secured before the demonstration. Roger that. What about the Morrison woman? Rebecca's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Sterling's handling it. Says it's time to stop playing games. The girl makes good leverage. Copy. Teams are in position. On your signal. The transmission ended. Rebecca stared at the equipment, her mind racing. They were planning something for tomorrow night, something involving General Crawford and a demonstration of some kind. And they intended to use Emma as leverage. She activated the bunker's secure communication system and placed a call to the one person she trusted completely. Admiral Catherine Wells, her former commanding officer who now worked in naval intelligence. Admiral Wells's office, came a crisp voice. This is Sierra Echo Alpha Lima, Rebecca said using her old call sign. I need to speak with Admiral Wells immediately. Priority Alpha. There was a pause, then, hold for the Admiral. Wells came on the line within seconds. Rebecca Morrison. I wondered when I'd hear from you. Ma'am, I have intelligence on a weapons smuggling operation involving senior military personnel. I need to transmit classified material for immediate analysis. Upload to secure server 77 Alpha, Wells replied without hesitation. I'll review it personally. Rebecca began the file transfer while briefing the Admiral on the situation. Wells listened without interruption, her silence speaking volumes about the gravity of the intelligence Rebecca was providing. How certain are you of the source material? Wells asked when Rebecca finished. It came from my husband's investigation. He died for this information, Admiral. Another pause. Rebecca, I need you to listen carefully. You're describing a conspiracy that goes far beyond local law enforcement's ability to handle. This is national security threat level. I understand that, ma'am. But they're planning something for tomorrow night, and they've threatened my daughter. Extraction team can be there in 6 hours. Negative, Rebecca said firmly. I'm not running. Not anymore. These people killed James, and now they're targeting Emma. This ends here. Wells was quiet for a long moment. What do you need? Official authorization to complete the mission. Full discretionary authority. Rebecca, you've been out of the service for 8 years. Some skills don't fade, Admiral, and I have local assets in place. A sheriff who wants to clean up his town and a former Delta Force operator who's been gathering intelligence on the same targets. Wells considered this. Very well. You're hereby reactivated under Article 473, Special Operations Directive, full autonomy, maximum discretion authorized. Complete the mission and come home, Chief Morrison. Understood, ma'am. After ending the transmission, Rebecca sat back in her chair, feeling the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow night, Sterling and Crawford would learn that they had made a fatal error in targeting her family. She activated the bunker's armory, selecting weapons and equipment for the coming confrontation. Her service pistol, a combat knife, tactical vest, night vision equipment, and several other items that would prove useful in close-quarters combat. As she prepared, Rebecca's gaze fell on the photograph of James that sat on the desk. His smile seemed to encourage her, reminding her of all the times he'd told her she was the best tactical mind he'd ever worked with. I won't let them win, she whispered to his image. Not against you and not against Emma. Outside, the September night was growing darker. Rebecca could hear vehicles on the county road, more surveillance, or the advance team for tomorrow's operation. Either way, she was ready. She'd spent the last week gathering intelligence, building alliances, and preparing for this moment. Tony Rodriguez was in position at the bank, monitoring Sterling's financial transactions. Sheriff Cross was coordinating with state authorities, ready to move when the evidence was complete. And Nancy Patterson was keeping Emma safe, prepared to execute emergency protocols if necessary. The conspiracy that had cost James his life was about to face the full fury of his widow's justice. Sterling Development, General Crawford, and Project Phoenix had thrived in shadows and corruption for too long. Tomorrow night, Rebecca Morrison would drag them into the light. The final transmission came just before midnight, confirming what Rebecca already suspected. Crawford had arrived in town, along with a delegation of Pentagon officials and State Department representatives. The demonstration Nancy had heard about was real, a showcase of stolen military technology for potential foreign buyers. Rebecca smiled grimly as she climbed the ladder out of the bunker. Let them come. She'd been preparing for this confrontation since the moment she'd opened James's letter, and she was ready to finish what her husband had started. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Eyes on target. Multiple hostiles confirmed. Game time tomorrow, 2100 hours. Rebecca typed back, confirmed. Execute on my signal. The pieces were in motion. Tomorrow would bring either justice or death, but it would bring an end to the conspiracy that had destroyed her family and threatened her daughter. As she walked back to the house where Emma slept peacefully, Rebecca felt the cold calm of operational focus settling over her. She'd been a wife and mother, a civilian trying to build a quiet life in the Nebraska countryside. But tomorrow night, she would be what James had always said she was, the deadliest person he'd ever met when her family was threatened. Sterling and Crawford were about to learn why Navy SEALs had a reputation for never leaving a mission unfinished. The hunt was almost over. The October moon hung heavy over Hawthorne Valley, casting silver light across the farmland as Rebecca Morrison checked her equipment one final time. Her M24A2 sniper rifle lay disassembled on the kitchen table, each component cleaned and inspected with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through multiple combat deployments. Tonight, those skills would be tested in ways she'd never imagined when she'd first purchased this peaceful farmstead 6 months ago. "I count 6 tangos, all armed," she whispered into her throat mic, watching through her night vision scope as 4 sets of headlights approached in tight formation down the long gravel driveway. Dust billowed behind them like phantom riders in the moonlight. Tony Rodriguez's gravelly voice crackled through her earpiece from his position at the south fence line. "Copy that. 2 in the lead truck, 1 in the second, 3 in the pickups behind. Remember, we need one of them alive." Rebecca's jaw tightened as she adjusted her scope. "Copy, and they need Emma alive too, which gives us leverage." She glanced at the trapdoor in the barn floor, knowing that 15 feet below, hidden in a reinforced concrete room that didn't appear on any property plans, her 9-year-old daughter waited in the dark. Terrified, but brave. Always brave. "Stay put, sweetheart," Rebecca had whispered before climbing to her sniper's nest. "No matter what you hear, stay quiet until I come for you." The truck slowed as they approached the farmhouse, headlights sweeping across the weathered clapboard exterior. Rebecca's finger hovered near the trigger guard. "Not on it, not yet." "They're stopping short of the motion sensors," she reported. "Smart. Disciplined." "Military trained," Tony confirmed, "just like we suspected." The lead vehicle's door opened and a tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the headlights. Even without magnification, Rebecca would have recognized Richard Sterling's imposing frame. The developer, who'd been systematically buying up half the county, carried himself with the arrogance of a man unaccustomed to hearing the word no. Tonight, she would teach him that particular lesson. "Showtime," Rebecca whispered, more to herself than to Tony. But this confrontation had been building for hours, ever since the meeting at the bank that had gone catastrophically wrong. Earlier that evening, Milbrook Community Bank. The bank's interior was dark, closed for the day, but Tony had used his security access to let Rebecca in through the rear entrance. They moved through the building using tactical flashlights, the beams cutting through shadows as they made their way to the secure conference room Tony had prepared. "Everything Daniel found is here," Rebecca said, placing James's laptop and external drives on the table. "Names, dates, transactions, enough to bring down the entire operation." Tony booted up his own systems, multiple monitors flickering to life. "We need to move fast, Rebecca." Word came down today. "My accident has been resolved. I'm being recalled to active duty, effective immediately. They're trying to remove you from the equation." "Exactly. Just like they did with James when he got too close." Tony's eyes met hers, regret evident. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, for all of it. James was the best of us." Rebecca swallowed the familiar surge of grief. "Help me finish what he started. That's how we honor him." For the next hour, they combed through the files, correlating James's evidence with Tony's intelligence from months of surveillance. The picture that emerged was damning beyond anything Rebecca had imagined. Project Phoenix wasn't just about selling existing technology to foreign interests. It was about establishing a permanent pipeline for ongoing arms deals, using Sterling Development as the logistics front. General Crawford provided access to classified weapons systems. Sterling handled transportation through his property corridor. Various government officials ensured that regulatory oversight remained conveniently blind. "The money trail is the key," Tony said, pointing to financial records James had compiled. "Offshore accounts, shell corporations, all leading back to this holding company in the Cayman Islands." Rebecca studied the documents. Can we trace the ownership? James was working on it when Tony didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. He was close. The last entry in his notes mentioned something called Chimera Holdings as the parent company. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Chimera, the mythological beast composed of different animals, like an operation composed of different players, military, civilian, government. They continued piecing together evidence, building a comprehensive case. The sophistication was impressive, the reach disturbing. This wasn't a rogue operation run by a few corrupt officials. It was systemic corruption reaching to the highest levels of power. We need to get this to the right people, Tony said finally. FBI, Justice Department. Too risky, Rebecca interrupted. Crawford has connections everywhere. We need someone outside the normal channels, but with enough authority to act. I might know someone, Tony said. Admiral Wells, your old CO. She's clean, and she has the ear of the Joint Chiefs. Rebecca nodded. We'll transmit everything to her secure server, then... Tony stopped suddenly, head tilted. Did you hear that? Rebecca had heard it too, a soft click from the main banking floor, like a door being carefully opened. She killed the lights immediately, both of them falling into combat-ready silence. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving with practiced stealth through the bank. At least 3 individuals, possibly more. Tony gestured toward the rear exit, but Rebecca shook her head. The sounds were coming from that direction too. They were being surrounded. Rebecca drew her weapon, Tony following suit. They positioned themselves on either side of the conference room door, communication flowing between them in the silent language of combat veterans. The footsteps grew closer. Rebecca calculated angles, firing lines, potential cover. The familiar calm of operational focus descended, slowing her perception of time, heightening her awareness of every sound and shadow. The door burst open, a tactical entry executed with professional precision. Rebecca identified the first man as a threat and reacted accordingly, striking with the butt of her handgun and connecting with his temple. He dropped instantly. Tony engaged the second intruder, disarming him with a swift series of movements that spoke of years of close-quarters combat training. But the third attacker fired, muzzle flash illuminating the darkened room. Tony grunted in pain, staggering backward. Blood bloomed on his shirt, high on the right shoulder. Rebecca fired twice, dropping the shooter, then dragged Tony behind the heavy conference table as more attackers converged on the room. "Go!" Tony gasped, pressing a thumb drive into her hand. "Everything's on here, get it out." "Not without you," Rebecca insisted, returning fire as another attacker appeared in the doorway. "Too late for me," Tony coughed, blood staining his lips now. Internal damage, worse than she'd thought. "Finish it, Rebecca." For James. A flashbang grenade skittered into the room. Rebecca had milliseconds to react, turning away and shielding her eyes as the device detonated with disorienting light and sound. Despite her precautions, the concussive force staggered her. Through ringing ears, she heard more attackers entering the room. Tony pushed her toward a ventilation grate in the wall. "Go!" he ordered, raising his weapon to provide covering fire. "Now!" Rebecca made the tactical choice, knowing that staying would mean death for both of them. She pried open the grate and slipped into the narrow duct, pulling it closed behind her as gunfire erupted in the conference room. She crawled rapidly through the ventilation system, guided by the building schematics she'd memorized earlier. Behind her, the sounds of combat faded, replaced by shouted orders and the methodical movements of a search operation. The ventilation shaft led to a utility room, and from there, Rebecca found a service exit that opened into an alley behind the bank. She emerged cautiously, weapon ready, scanning for threats. The alley appeared clear, but she could hear vehicles converging on the bank, reinforcements for the attack team. Rebecca moved quickly through back streets, avoiding main roads and potential observation points. Tony was likely dead or captured, the bank was compromised, and the thumb drive in her pocket contained evidence that powerful people would kill to suppress. Rebecca changed direction, heading for the one place in Milbrook she knew remained secure, the hidden bunker beneath her barn, the farmhouse, 11:47 p.m. Rebecca approached her property from the rear, moving cross-country, using skills honed through years of special operations training. Night navigation, terrain appreciation, silent movement through cover, all second nature now. As she neared the farmhouse from the creekside, where vegetation provided concealment, Rebecca noted, with grim satisfaction, that her precautions had been justified. Two black SUVs were parked on the access road, men with tactical gear establishing a perimeter around her home. They expected her to return directly. Instead, she circled wide, approaching the barn through the drainage ditch that ran along the eastern property line. Moving from shadow to shadow, Rebecca avoided the search team's patrol patterns and slipped into the barn through the loose board she'd left specifically unrepaired for this purpose. Inside the barn was dark and silent. Rebecca moved to the hidden trapdoor, ensuring she wasn't observed before opening it and descending into the bunker. The space hummed with quiet energy as she activated the systems James had installed. Communications equipment, surveillance monitors linked to cameras hidden around the property, weapons storage, a compact but comprehensive operations center. Rebecca plugged Tony's thumb drive into the main computer, transferring its contents to the secure server. While the data uploaded, she checked the surveillance feeds, assessing the situation above ground. The men surrounding her house wore tactical gear with no identifying markings, private military contractors most likely. Their movements suggested professional training, probably former special forces. They were establishing a classic containment perimeter, expecting to intercept her when she returned home. More concerning was the feed from inside the house. Through the hidden camera in the living room, Rebecca could see Walter Hayes seated in his armchair, shotgun across his lap, watching the front door with the patient vigilance of a seasoned soldier. He was alive and unharmed, but surrounded. And Emma was upstairs, hopefully still asleep in the reinforced panic room, unaware of the danger closing in around her. Rebecca activated the communication system and placed the call that would change everything. Admiral Wells. "Ma'am, this is Sierra Echo Alpha Lima requesting immediate backup. Authentication Tango 74 Charlie Oscar." A pause. "Authentication confirmed. Proceed, Sierra Echo Alpha Lima. Target is Project Phoenix, military technology smuggling operation. Evidence transmitting now to your secure server." Rebecca initiated the file transfer. "Understood. Transfer commencing." Another pause. "This is coming through your husband's authentication codes. He initiated the investigation, Admiral. Paid for it with his life." Wells's voice softened slightly. "Morrison was one of our best. His death was concerning." "It was murder," Rebecca corrected flatly, "by the same people now trying to kill me and my daughter." Current situation. Compromised, surrounded, asset down. Rebecca didn't elaborate on Tony's status. Civilians at risk. Extraction options. Negative on extraction. I'm seeing this through. Rebecca checked the surveillance feeds again. The men outside were beginning a systematic search of the outbuildings. "Need authorization for terminal action. Cleanup crew for aftermath." Admiral Wells understood immediately. "Time frame? 24 hours maximum." "Authorized." The Admiral's tone returned to formal protocol. "Chief Morrison, you are hereby reactivated under Article 473, Special Operations Directive. Full autonomy, maximum discretion authorized." "Understood." "Complete the mission, Chief Morrison, and come home." The connection terminated. Rebecca turned her attention back to the surveillance monitors. The search team had reached the barn, two men entering with weapons drawn. Time was running out. Rebecca gathered essential equipment from the bunker stores: extra ammunition, combat knife, communications gear, medical kit, night vision equipment, everything secured in a tactical vest that had once belonged to James. As she prepared to leave through the tunnel James had constructed, a narrow passage leading to the storm drain on the property's eastern boundary. Movement on the monitors caught her attention. Lights were coming on in Emma's bedroom. Her daughter was awake, and the men outside had just discovered Walter in the living room. Rebecca made her decision instantly. The tunnel would have to wait. Her family needed her now. She secured her equipment, checked her weapons one final time, and ascended the ladder to the barn floor. The two searchers had moved on, continuing their methodical sweep. Rebecca emerged silently into the darkness, every sense alert. The October night was clear and cold, stars glittering overhead. In the distance, coyotes called across the empty fields. She moved like a ghost across her own property, drawing closer to the house and the confrontation she could no longer avoid. Through her earpiece, she heard the activation of the emergency protocol she'd installed weeks ago, a communication system linked to hidden speakers in Emma's room. "Mockingbird, this is Nest," she whispered into her throat mic. "Code red. Acknowledge." Seconds passed, then Emma's voice came through, small but steady. "Nest, this is Mockingbird." Code red acknowledged. Relief flooded through Rebecca. Emma was alone and alert enough to respond correctly. "Mockingbird, execute thunderstorm protocol. Confirm when secure." "Executing thunderstorm now." Rebecca watched the house, counting seconds. Thunderstorm protocol meant Emma would lock her bedroom door, then enter the hidden compartment in her closet, a reinforced space with a separate entrance accessible only through a concealed panel. From inside, Emma could secure it with a deadbolt that would take explosive charges to breach. "Mockingbird secure." Emma's voice came through after 43 seconds. "Mom, there are bad men in the house?" "I know, sweetheart. I'm going to take care of it. Stay absolutely silent until I come for you. Remember our special knock? 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. That's my girl." Silent now. Rebecca surveyed the property once more, formulating her approach. The men were professionals, maintaining proper distances and fields of fire. Taking them head-on would be suicide. She needed to change the equation. From her tactical vest, Rebecca removed a sonic disruptor. Standard issue for her former unit, definitely not something a civilian should possess. She activated it and tossed it toward the far side of the property, where it landed silently in the tall grass. 10 seconds later, the device emitted a high-pitched sound, mimicking a perimeter alarm. As anticipated, 2 of the exterior guards immediately moved to investigate, speaking into their communication units as they approached the disturbance. 4 external targets remaining. Rebecca circled through the cornfield, coming up behind the man guarding the rear entrance. Moving silently through years of ingrained training, she closed the distance. One hand clamped over his mouth, the other driving her knife between his ribs with surgical precision. A swift, silent kill. She lowered his body to the ground, relieving him of his communications device and sidearm. 3 external targets. The dead man's radio crackled. "Position 4. Check in." Rebecca pitched her voice low, approximating the fallen guard's cadence. "Position 4. All clear." A pause. "Confirmed. Status Mason." Rebecca knew she couldn't risk another response. The element of surprise was diminishing rapidly. Circling toward the front of the house, she spotted one of the perimeter guards checking his watch, distracted. She lined up her shot carefully, using the suppressor attached to her handgun. The round struck center mass. He dropped without a sound. 2 external targets. The remaining guards were now on high alert, having lost contact with their teammates. Rebecca heard urgent chatter through the commandeered radio. They were calling for backup. Time was running short. She spotted the two men who had investigated the sonic disruptor returning to the house, moving with increased caution. Rebecca allowed them to pass her position, then took them both with consecutive shots, clean and professional. The final external guard was now frantically reporting the situation through his communication unit. Rebecca lined up her shot, but before she could take it, the front door opened. Richard Sterling himself stepped onto the porch, flanked by Deputy Frank Nash in full tactical gear. Two more armed men stood guard inside the doorway. "What's happening out here?" Sterling demanded, his cultured voice carrying across the yard. The surviving guard turned toward his employer. "We've lost contact with 4 men, sir." Possible hostile presence on the property. Sterling's face tightened with anger. "Find her! Now!" Rebecca adjusted her position, seeking a better angle. Through the open door, she could see Walter seated in the living room, hands bound, a cut on his forehead, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Sterling turned to Nash. "Get the girl. She's our leverage." Ice crystallized in Rebecca's veins. Time for subtlety was over. She took the shot, dropping the final external guard. Sterling and Nash ducked back inside, slamming the door. Rebecca heard shouting, the sound of furniture being moved to barricade entrances. 5 targets inside the house, plus Sterling and Nash, 7 total, and they were heading for Emma. Rebecca sprinted toward the house, abandoning stealth for speed. She reached the back door to find it secured from inside. No time for finesse. She fired twice into the lock mechanism, shattering it, then kicked the door open. The kitchen was empty, but she could hear movement in the living room. 3 distinct voices, one moving toward the stairs. Rebecca pressed herself against the wall beside the doorway, listening. She pulled a small mirror from her vest, angling it to glimpse the living room. Walter was still seated, now with a gun pressed to his temple by one of Sterling's men. Sterling himself stood near the fireplace, speaking urgently into a phone. Nash was heading for the stairs, going for Emma. Rebecca made her decision instantly. She rounded the doorway, weapon raised, and fired twice. The first round caught the man holding Walter, dropping him instantly. The second struck the guard near the window, who managed to return fire before falling. Pain flared along Rebecca's left arm as the bullet grazed her, but she ignored it, diving into a crouch as Sterling scrambled for cover behind the sofa. Nash, hearing the gunfire, had paused on the stairs, drawing his service weapon. "Drop it, Morrison," he shouted, using the banister as cover. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." "That math doesn't work from where I'm standing, Deputy," Rebecca replied coolly, staying in her protected position. "4 of your men are down outside, 2 more in here. It's just you, Sterling, and whoever else is upstairs." Sterling's voice came from behind the sofa. "Be reasonable, Mrs. Morrison. We don't want to hurt your daughter." "Then you shouldn't have come to my home," Rebecca answered, her voice deadly calm. She glanced at Walter, making eye contact. The old soldier gave an almost imperceptible nod. He was ready. "Last chance to surrender, Sterling," Rebecca called out, a harsh laugh from behind the sofa. "You're in no position to make threats." "I'm not threatening, Sterling," Rebecca replied. "I'm promising." In one fluid motion, Walter drove his shoulder backward, toppling his chair and creating a momentary distraction. Rebecca used the opportunity to fire at Nash, catching him in the shoulder and sending him tumbling down the stairs. Sterling fired blindly from behind the sofa, bullets splintering the doorframe above Rebecca's head. She rolled to a new position, coming up with a clear shot at Sterling's exposed leg. She took it. Sterling howled in pain as the bullet shattered his kneecap. His weapon clattered to the floor, spinning away from his reach. Rebecca approached cautiously, weapon trained on his head. "Call them off, Sterling! Whoever's upstairs going after my daughter, call them off now." Blood drained from Sterling's face, partly from pain, partly from the realization that he'd lost control. "Crawford!" he shouted. "Stand down!" Abort. Silence from upstairs, then heavy footsteps moving toward Emma's room. "They're not listening, Sterling," Rebecca said. Bad management on your part. She turned toward the stairs, but Nash, despite his wound, lunged at her from his fallen position. The impact sent them both crashing into the coffee table, Rebecca's weapon skittering across the floor. Nash was bigger, heavier, but Rebecca was a trained combatant. She drove her elbow into his wounded shoulder, causing him to howl in pain. As he recoiled, she slammed her forehead into his nose, feeling cartilage crack. Nash still managed to wrap his hands around her throat, his thumbs pressing into her windpipe. Rebecca's vision began to dim, but she reached blindly, fingers finding a shard of glass from the shattered coffee table. With one decisive movement, she drove it into Nash's neck. His grip loosened instantly as he fell back, blood coating her hands. Rebecca scrambled for her weapon, retrieving it just as another guard appeared at the top of the stairs. She fired without hesitation. The man tumbled down the staircase, dead before he hit the bottom step. From above, she heard a splintering sound. Someone was trying to break into Emma's room. "Hold on, Walter," Rebecca said, sparing a glance at the older man who was working to free himself from his bonds. "I'm getting Emma." She took the stairs two at a time, ignoring the pain in her arm and the bruising forming on her throat. At the top of the landing, Rebecca paused, listening. Another crack of splintering wood came from Emma's room. Through the partially open door, she could see a large man with his back to her, attempting to break through the closet door with the butt of his rifle. "She's in here, sir," he called over his shoulder. "Some kind of hidden compartment." From the hallway came a voice Rebecca recognized immediately, General Martin Crawford. "Get her out, Hanson." "Now." Rebecca stepped into the doorway, weapon raised. "Step away from the closet." The man, Hanson, spun around, raising his rifle. Rebecca fired twice, center mass. He dropped to his knees, then fell forward onto the bedroom floor. Rebecca moved into the room, using the bed for cover as she anticipated Crawford's approach. The general appeared in the doorway, his military bearing unmistakable despite civilian clothes. He held a handgun with the comfortable grip of someone well practiced in its use. "Chief Petty Officer Morrison," Crawford said, as if greeting her at a formal military function rather than in her daughter's bullet-riddled bedroom. "I was hoping we could resolve this situation more diplomatically. By sending armed men into my home, threatening my daughter." Rebecca kept her weapon trained on him. "That's an interesting definition of diplomacy, General." Crawford's expression remained impassive. "Your husband left you in a precarious position, Chief. He should have known better than to involve his family in matters of national security." "Don't you dare speak about James," Rebecca snarled, finger tightening on the trigger. "He discovered your treason. He was going to expose you, so you had him killed." "A regrettable necessity," Crawford admitted without a flicker of remorse. "James was an exceptional soldier, but he was naive about the realities of global power projection. The reality where generals sell classified technology to America's enemies?" Crawford's eyes narrowed. "You have no understanding of the complexities involved. Project Phoenix isn't about profit. It's about maintaining strategic balance in an increasingly chaotic world." "Save the patriotic bullshit," Rebecca replied coldly. "I've seen the evidence. The offshore accounts, the money trail. This isn't about national security. It's about greed." Something dangerous flickered in Crawford's eyes. "Put down your weapon, Chief. Your daughter is still in that closet, still within reach. Don't force me to demonstrate how serious I am about resolving this situation." Rebecca felt cold fury wash through her. "You really think I'd let you walk out of here after what you did to James, after threatening Emma?" "I think you're a mother who wants her daughter to live," Crawford replied, his weapon remaining steady. "The evidence is already contained. Rodriguez is dead. The files at the bank have been secured. Whatever you think you know died with your husband." A smile touched Rebecca's lips. "That's where you're wrong, General. Everything, every file, every transaction, every name has already been transmitted to Admiral Wells at Naval Intelligence. It's over. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Crawford's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Wells has reactivated me under Article 473. Do you know what that means, General?" Crawford didn't answer, but his grip tightened on his weapon. "It means I have full authorization to eliminate national security threats with extreme prejudice," Rebecca continued. "There's nowhere you could hide, no friends in high places who could protect you. You're already dead, you just don't know it yet." Crawford's expression hardened. "If you've done what you claim, you've signed your daughter's death warrant. My organization reaches further than you can imagine." "You're assuming you're leaving this room alive," Rebecca replied, her voice deadly calm. "Are you really prepared to execute a general officer in cold blood, Chief? Think of the consequences." "I'm thinking of the consequences of letting a traitor walk free." For a moment, neither moved. Then Crawford's expression shifted subtly. Rebecca recognized the look of a tactical decision being made. Crawford lunged sideways, firing as he moved toward Emma's closet. Rebecca fired simultaneously, her round catching him in the chest. His bullet splintered the woodwork beside her. The general staggered, a look of genuine surprise crossing his features. He fired again, wild, the round embedding in the ceiling. Rebecca's second shot hit him in the throat. Crawford dropped to his knees, gun falling from nerveless fingers, blood bubbling from his lips as he tried to speak. He slumped forward, dead. Rebecca moved quickly to the closet, giving the prearranged signal. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. She heard the deadbolt slide back, and then the hidden panel swung open. Emma emerged, pale but composed, exactly as Rebecca had trained her. "Mom!" Emma flung herself into Rebecca's arms. "You're bleeding!" Rebecca held her daughter tight, adrenaline beginning to ebb, bringing pain in its wake. "Just a scratch. I'm okay." She pulled back, examining Emma for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Emma shook her head. "I did exactly what you taught me." I stayed quiet and hid. "You were perfect," Rebecca assured her, throat tight with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." Heavy footsteps on the stairs reminded Rebecca that the situation wasn't fully resolved. She positioned Emma behind her, raising her weapon toward the doorway. Walter Hayes appeared, shotgun in hand, blood trickling from the cut on his forehead but otherwise intact. "House is clear," he reported in clipped military tones. Sterling secured downstairs, tried to crawl away, but didn't get far with that shattered knee. Rebecca lowered her weapon, relief washing through her. "Thank you, Walter, for everything." The old soldier nodded, then noticed Emma peering around Rebecca's leg. His weathered face softened. "Hello there, little lady. That was some mighty fine hiding you did." Emma managed a small smile. "Mom taught me how." "Your mom's quite a woman," Walter agreed, then looked back to Rebecca. "What's the plan now?" "Sterling's people will be looking for him when he doesn't check in." Rebecca checked her watch. The operation had taken less than 20 minutes from start to finish, but backup could arrive at any moment. "We need to move. My contact at Naval Intelligence is sending a cleanup team, but they won't be here until morning." Walter nodded, understanding. "My place. They don't know about our connection yet." Rebecca quickly gathered essential items. Emma's stuffed rabbit, a change of clothes, the photograph of James from her nightstand. As they prepared to leave, Emma looked back at Crawford's body. "Is he the one who hurt Dad?" she asked quietly. Rebecca considered lying, offering a comforting fiction, but Emma deserved truth, even the painful kind. Yes, he was. Emma studied the fallen general with eyes too old for her years. "Good," she said simply, taking Rebecca's hand. "Let's go." They descended the stairs carefully, stepping over bodies. In the living room, Richard Sterling sat propped against the wall, a makeshift tourniquet around his shattered knee, hands bound with zip ties. His face was ashen from pain and blood loss, but his eyes burned with hatred as they fell on Rebecca. "You have no idea what you've done, Morrison," he spat. "The people I work for—" "Save it, Sterling," Rebecca interrupted coldly. "Your operation is exposed. Evidence has already been transmitted to federal authorities. Crawford is dead. It's over." Sterling's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "We can make a deal. I have resources, connections. Name your price." "You think this is about money?" Rebecca felt fresh contempt. "You helped kill my husband, threatened my daughter. There's not enough money in the world." "Then what do you want?" Rebecca met his gaze directly. "Justice!" She turned away, guiding Emma toward the door. Behind them, Sterling called out desperately, "You can't just leave me here. I need medical attention." "Sheriff Cross will be here soon," Rebecca replied without turning. "Whether you're alive when he arrives depends on how much blood you lose." Outside, the night air was crisp and clean, washing away the cordite smell of gunfire. Walter led them to his truck, parked behind the barn where the attackers hadn't discovered it. "I notified Cross," he said as they climbed in. "Use the emergency frequency from my old CB radio. He's on his way with state police backup." Rebecca settled Emma between them on the bench seat, then pulled out her secure phone. "Admiral Wells, this is Chief Morrison. Mission complete." "Status report." Wells's voice was crisp despite the late hour. "Primary target eliminated. Secondary target secured for questioning. Evidence package confirmed, transmitted and received. Confirmed. Cleanup team ETA 6 hours. Outstanding work, Chief." "Thank you, ma'am. Request immediate protection detail for my daughter and myself. This conspiracy has deep roots." "Already in motion. You'll have full federal protection within the hour." As they drove away from the farmhouse, Rebecca looked back at the building illuminated by moonlight. Blood had been spilled there tonight, lives taken, a reckoning delivered. The peaceful home she'd hoped to create for Emma now bore the scars of violence and death. Yet strangely, she felt no regret, only a grim satisfaction that James's killers had faced justice and that Emma was safe beside her. They'd nearly reached the main road when headlights appeared ahead, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Walter tensed, reaching for his shotgun. "Easy," Rebecca cautioned, recognizing the lead vehicle. "It's Sheriff Cross." The convoy skidded to a stop beside them. Cross's cruiser followed by 3 state police units. The sheriff emerged, weapon drawn but pointed downward, his expression tense until he recognized the truck's occupants. "Rebecca!" Relief flooded his features. "When I got Walter's message, I feared the worst." "Sterling sent a team to the house," Rebecca explained tersely. "Crawford was with them. They're neutralized." Cross absorbed this with a professional nod. "Crawford?" The general. "The same. He's dead. Sterling's alive for now." Gunshot wound to the knee. The sheriff holstered his weapon. "State police are 10 minutes out from the farm. FBI's en route from Omaha." "Admiral Wells is sending a federal team," Rebecca added. "Naval intelligence. They'll be here by morning to handle jurisdictional issues and evidence processing." Cross raised an eyebrow. "Naval intelligence?" "Rebecca, what exactly were you involved in out there?" "Classified," Rebecca replied simply. "But I can tell you that James died uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command. Tonight, his killers got their justice." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Where are you heading now?" "Walter's place, until the federal protection detail arrives." "I'll post deputies I trust personally," Cross promised. "No one will get near you." Rebecca reached out, clasping his hand briefly. "Thank you, James, for believing in me from the start." The sheriff's weathered face softened. "Sometimes you can just tell when someone's fighting for the right reasons." His gaze shifted to Emma, huddled against Rebecca's side. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Emma looked up at him with solemn eyes. "Mom took care of the bad men." "I bet she did," Cross replied gently. "Your mom is quite something." As the convoy of police vehicles continued toward the farm, Walter drove them to his house, a modest two-story structure that had stood through 50 Nebraska winters. He ushered them inside immediately, securing doors and windows with practiced efficiency. "Spare bedroom upstairs," he said, gesturing toward the staircase. "Should be comfortable enough until morning." Rebecca helped Emma upstairs, running a bath and helping her daughter wash away the fear and tension of the night. As Emma soaked in the warm water, Rebecca sat beside the tub, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what they'd survived. "Will we go back home?" Emma asked as Rebecca helped her into clean pajamas. "I don't know, sweetheart. Not right away. The house needs to be cleaned up, and we might need to go somewhere else for a while." "Because there might be more bad men?" Sometimes Rebecca forgot how perceptive her daughter was. "There might be, but not for long. The people I work for now will make sure we're safe." Emma considered this. Like Dad's bosses. Something like that. As Emma settled into the unfamiliar bed, she caught Rebecca's hand. "Mum, did we win?" The question, so simple yet profound, caught Rebecca off guard. Had they won? Crawford was dead, Sterling captured, the conspiracy exposed. But at what cost? Tony Rodriguez was gone, their home was a crime scene, and Emma's innocence had been further eroded. Yet, as she looked into her daughter's expectant face, Rebecca realized the answer was clear. "Yes," she said finally, "we won. Your dad can rest easy now." Emma nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep, the resilience of childhood allowing her to find peace despite the trauma. Downstairs, Rebecca found Walter in his kitchen, brewing coffee. He'd cleaned the cut on his forehead and changed into fresh clothes, but she could see the weariness in his eyes. "Hell of a thing," he said, pouring 2 mugs and sliding one across the counter. Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Thank you for everything tonight. I couldn't have done it without you." Walter waved off her gratitude. "Couldn't stand by and let them hurt that little girl. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "felt good to be in the fight again, even at my age." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, the weight of the night's events settling around them like dust after a storm. "What happens now?" Walter asked finally. Rebecca sipped her coffee, considering. "Federal protection, probably. Witness protection if necessary. Sterling will talk. Men like him always do when faced with life in prison. There will be trials, congressional hearings, a lot of public attention." "That what you want?" Rebecca thought about it. The prospect of living under constant scrutiny, of having their story dissected by lawyers and politicians and journalists, of Emma growing up under that kind of pressure. "No," she admitted, "but it's the only way to make sure this ends completely. That there aren't any loose ends left to threaten Emma later." Walter nodded slowly. "Might be right about that. These kinds of conspiracies, they're like cancer. You have to cut out every last cell, or it comes back stronger." Outside, the sound of vehicles arrived. The federal protection detail, most likely. Rebecca checked her phone, confirming the secure message from Admiral Wells. "They're here," she said, moving to the window to verify the credentials of the agents outside. Walter stood as well, straightening his shoulders with military bearing. "Been an honor, Rebecca. Your husband would be proud." "He would have liked you, Walter. You're exactly the kind of man he respected most." The old soldier's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "Take care of that little girl. She's got her father's courage and her mother's steel. She's going to be something special." Rebecca felt her own throat tighten. "I will. And Walter, if you ever need anything, I know where to find you," he finished with a smile. The federal agents were at the door now, their presence signaling the beginning of a new phase in Rebecca and Emma's lives. Not the quiet refuge Rebecca had originally sought, but something perhaps equally valuable, a chance to see justice fully served and to build something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. As she went upstairs to wake Emma, Rebecca felt something like peace settling in her chest for the first time since James's death. The immediate battle was over, but the war for truth and justice would continue, and this time she wouldn't be fighting it alone. Dawn broke over Hawthorne Valley like a promise of redemption, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold that seemed almost obscene in their beauty after the violence of the night. Rebecca Morrison stood at the window of Walter Hayes's farmhouse, watching the convoy of government vehicles wind their way down the county road toward her property. FBI, Naval Intelligence, State Police, a parade of acronyms and agencies descending on the quiet Nebraska countryside to clean up the mess that had cost so many lives. Behind her, Emma slept peacefully in Walter's spare bedroom, exhausted by trauma but safe at last. On the kitchen table, Rebecca's secure phone buzzed with constant updates from Admiral Wells's team as they processed the crime scene and began unraveling the full extent of Project Phoenix. "Hell of a thing to watch," Walter said quietly, joining her at the window with 2 cups of coffee. "All those years, I wondered what really happened to Colonel Patterson. Now I know." Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully, her hands still bearing the faint tremor that came after intense combat. "How are you holding up?" The old soldier shrugged, touching the bandage on his forehead. "I've had worse hangovers. Besides, felt good to be useful again. Your husband was lucky to have you watching his 6. James always said I was the better tactical mind," Rebecca replied, her throat tight with the familiar ache of loss. "I just never thought I'd have to prove it like this." Her phone rang. Admiral Wells, right on schedule. "Chief Morrison." Wells's voice was crisp despite the early hour. "Sitrep on cleanup operations." "Standing by, Admiral." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. We've identified 17 members of the conspiracy so far, including 3 Pentagon officials and a State Department liaison. Sterling's talking, singing like a canary actually. Seems near-death experiences make some people remarkably cooperative." Rebecca felt a grim satisfaction. "And the evidence from James's files?" "Ironclad. Congressional subpoenas are being issued as we speak. The president has been briefed, and there's going to be a complete investigation of military procurement and oversight procedures." "What about cleanup of local assets?" "Sterling had people embedded throughout the county." Wells paused. "That's actually why I'm calling. We need to discuss your future, Rebecca. Yours and Emma's." Rebecca had been dreading this conversation. "Witness protection? It's the standard protocol. New identities, relocation, complete severance from your previous life. You'd be safe, but you'd also disappear. For how long? Indefinitely. This conspiracy has international connections, Rebecca. Some very dangerous people have lost a great deal of money and prestige because of your actions. The threat level will remain elevated for years." Rebecca stared out at the crime scene investigators swarming over her property. Her home, the place she'd hoped would give Emma stability and peace, now wrapped in yellow tape and crawling with federal agents. "There's another option," she said slowly, an idea crystallizing that she'd been mulling over since the gunfire ended. "What if we don't hide? Explain. Go public. Tell the whole story. Make Emma and me so visible that any move against us becomes front-page news." Admiral Wells was quiet for several moments. "That's unorthodox and risky." "High risk, high reward," Rebecca replied, falling back on the tactical maxim that had guided her through multiple deployments. "These people thrive in shadows, Admiral. Drag them into the light and they lose their power. It would mean congressional testimony, media appearances, your private life dissected in public. I'm prepared for that, we both are. Emma's just a child, Rebecca. Emma's a child who's already lived through more trauma than most adults. She deserves to know that her father died for something meaningful, that his sacrifice mattered. Another pause, longer this time. Your husband always said you were the strategist in the family. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. James had said that many times, usually when she'd pointed out flaws in some operation or suggested alternative approaches that proved more successful. He mentioned that more than once, she managed. All right, Chief. If that's your decision, I'll make the arrangements. Press conference tomorrow afternoon. We'll position you as the military widow who uncovered the conspiracy, the grieving mother who brought down a corruption ring that threatened national security. And Emma? Minimal exposure, but enough to ensure her safety through visibility. The media loves a human interest angle, the brave little girl who helped her mum seek justice for her fallen father. Rebecca nodded, decision made. Thank you, Admiral, for believing in us. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca. The hard part is just beginning. After ending the call, Rebecca found Walter watching her with knowing eyes. Smart move, he said simply. They can't touch you if the whole country's watching. That's the theory. We'll see if it holds up in practice. Movement upstairs indicated Emma was waking up. Rebecca climbed the stairs, finding her daughter sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the activity on their property. Are all those people at our house because of last night? Emma asked without turning around. Yes, sweetheart, they're making sure we got all the bad men. Emma nodded solemnly. Will we ever be able to go home? Rebecca sat beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. Not to that house, probably. Too much happened there. But we'll make a new home, somewhere safe. Will there be more bad men looking for us? Sometimes Rebecca was amazed by Emma's perceptive questions. There might be. But I have an idea about how to keep us safe. She explained the plan in terms Emma could understand. They would tell their story to newspapers and TV stations, make sure everyone knew what had happened and why. That way, if anyone tried to hurt them, the whole world would know who was responsible. Emma listened intently, then asked, Will we tell them about Dad? About how he was really a hero? Rebecca felt her heart break and mend simultaneously. Yes, baby. We'll make sure everyone knows your father was a hero. Good, Emma said with the simple certainty of childhood. I want people to know the truth about Dad. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of debriefings and procedural meetings. Sheriff Cross arrived with the state police investigators, his expression grim as he surveyed the crime scene that had once been Rebecca's peaceful farmhouse. 17 bullet holes in the living room alone, he reported, shaking his head. Sterling's lucky to be alive. That knee's going to require multiple surgeries, assuming he lives long enough to stand trial. Will he? Rebecca asked. Oh, he'll live. Man's too mean to die, and the feds have him under round-the-clock medical supervision. They want him healthy enough to testify against his co-conspirators. Rebecca nodded. Justice delayed wasn't justice denied. As long as it eventually arrived, FBI Special Agent Jennifer Martinez arrived midday with a team of forensic accountants and digital specialists. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd spent years chasing white-collar criminals. Mrs. Morrison, Martinez said, extending her hand, I've been briefed on your situation. I understand you're considering going public rather than entering witness protection. That's correct. Martinez studied her for a moment. I've seen the evidence your husband compiled. It's remarkably comprehensive. The financial forensics alone will take months to fully analyze. Is it enough to secure convictions? Against Sterling and Crawford's immediate circle? Absolutely. But this conspiracy has tentacles reaching into multiple agencies and private defense contractors. Some of the bigger fish might slip through the cracks. Rebecca felt her jaw tighten. Not if I can help it. That's what I wanted to discuss. Your public testimony could be the key to exposing the full extent of the corruption, but it also paints a target on your back that witness protection would remove. Agent Martinez, Rebecca said firmly, these people killed my husband and threatened my daughter. I'm not hiding from them. I'm going to drag every single one of them into the light and watch them burn. Martinez smiled grimly. In that case, let's talk about how to make that happen. They spent the next 2 hours planning the media strategy. Rebecca would give exclusive interviews to selected journalists, appear before congressional committees, and provide expert testimony about military procurement vulnerabilities. Emma would make limited appearances, enough to humanize the story, but not enough to traumatize her further. The key is controlling the narrative from the beginning, Martinez explained. We position you as the relentless seeker of truth, not a vengeful widow. Justice, not revenge. Rebecca nodded, remembering James's final letter and his warning about the difference between the two. That afternoon, Nancy Patterson arrived with flowers and a carefully worded resignation letter from Milbrook Elementary. I can't stay here, she explained to Rebecca as they sat in Walter's living room. Not after what happened to Lisa, what almost happened to Emma. Sterling might be finished, but his influence runs deep in this town. Where will you go? My cousin teaches in Colorado. She says they have openings. Nancy's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know Emma was just starting to settle in. Emma, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway, approached slowly. It's okay, Mrs. Patterson. Mom says we might not be coming back to school here anyway. Nancy knelt to Emma's level. You're going to do great things, Emma Morrison. Your parents gave you courage and intelligence. That's a combination that can change the world. Emma hugged her teacher fiercely. Will you remember me? Always, Nancy promised. And I'll remember your father too. He was a hero, and now everyone will know it. The evening brought a surprise visitor, Tony Rodriguez, alive and bearing the scars of his encounter at the bank. He moved stiffly, his left arm in a sling and bandages visible beneath his shirt, but his eyes held the bright intensity of a man who'd survived the impossible. Tony! Rebecca embraced him carefully, mindful of his injuries. They told me you were dead. Nearly was, he admitted, settling onto Walter's couch with a grimace. Took 3 bullets, lost a lot of blood, but the medical team got to me just in time. How did you survive the bank? Tony's expression darkened. They wanted information about the evidence we'd compiled. When I wouldn't talk, they decided to keep me alive until they could break me. He touched his bandaged shoulder. Let's just say their interrogation techniques weren't particularly gentle. But you held out, long enough for your little fireworks display to draw all their attention. When the cavalry arrived, my guards decided to cut their losses and run. Emma appeared at Rebecca's side, studying Tony with curious eyes. Are you one of Dad's friends? Tony's weathered face softened. I was, sweetheart. Your dad and I served together for many years. Mom says Dad was investigating bad men when he died. He was. And thanks to your mom, those bad men are going to prison for a very long time. Emma nodded gravely. Good. Bad men should go to prison. That evening, Admiral Wells called with final arrangements for the media rollout. The press conference would be held at the Federal Building in Omaha, with select follow-up interviews over the following weeks. We're positioning this as the complete exposure of a systematic betrayal of American military personnel and taxpayers, Wells explained. You're not just seeking justice for your husband, you're protecting every service member who might face similar threats. Understood, Admiral. One more thing, Rebecca. The President wants to meet with you and Emma, privately, before the public appearances begin. Rebecca was stunned. The President. He's taking this personally. Military corruption, threats against Gold Star families. It hits all his hot buttons. He wants to assure you of his personal support and his commitment to seeing this through to the end. After ending the call, Rebecca sat in Walter's living room, trying to process how dramatically their lives had changed in less than 24 hours. This time yesterday, she'd been a grieving widow trying to build a quiet life in rural Nebraska. Now she was about to become the public face of one of the biggest military scandals in decades. "Penny for your thoughts," Walter said, settling into his armchair with a glass of bourbon. "Just wondering if I'm making the right choice," Rebecca admitted. "Putting Emma through all this attention, the scrutiny." "You know what I think?" Walter asked. "I think your little girl has already been through hell. At least this way, she'll see some good come of it. She'll know her father's sacrifice meant something." Rebecca nodded, but uncertainty gnawed at her. What if I can't protect her from all this? What if the media attention, the pressure? "Rebecca," Walter interrupted gently, "that child has survived her father's death, a cross-country move, school bullies, and an armed assault on her home. You really think a few reporters are going to break her?" The observation brought a small smile to Rebecca's face. "She is remarkably resilient. She gets it from both parents," Walter said. "James gave her courage, you gave her steel. She's going to be fine." The next morning dawned clear and cold, October asserting itself with frost on the windows and the promise of winter in the air. Rebecca woke early, unable to sleep past 5 a.m. despite her exhaustion. She found Walter already up, preparing coffee and reading updates on his tablet. "How's it looking?" she asked, accepting a steaming mug. "Sterling's been formally charged with treason, conspiracy, and about 12 other felonies. 3 Pentagon officials arrested overnight. Stock prices for several defense contractors are in free fall." He looked up from the screen. "Your husband's evidence is dismantling this whole network piece by piece." Rebecca felt a surge of fierce pride. James had started this fight, and she was going to finish it. Emma woke around 7 a.m., unusually quiet, but alert. She dressed carefully in the new clothes Rebecca had purchased the day before, a navy dress with white trim that made her look older and more serious. "Are you nervous about today?" Rebecca asked as she braided Emma's hair. "A little," Emma admitted. "Will there be a lot of people?" "Quite a few. But remember, they're not there to hurt us. They want to hear our story, to learn the truth about what happened to Dad." Emma nodded solemnly. "I want to tell them about Dad, about how he used to read me stories and teach me to throw a football." Rebecca's throat tightened. "You can tell them anything you want, sweetheart, or nothing at all, if that's what you prefer." "I want to tell them," Emma said firmly. "I want everyone to know what a good dad he was." The drive to Omaha took 2 hours, their convoy of federal vehicles attracting curious stares from other drivers. Emma pressed her face to the window, watching the Nebraska landscape roll by. "Will we live in a big city now?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Rebecca admitted. "We'll have choices to make after all this is over, about where we want to live, what kind of life we want to build. Can we live somewhere with horses? Dad always promised we'd get a horse someday." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Maybe we can. Would you like that?" "I think Dad would have liked that too." The federal building in Omaha was the imposing structure of glass and steel, surrounded by media vans and curious onlookers. Rebecca was struck by the surreal nature of it all, a small-town widow and her daughter at the center of a national security scandal. Admiral Wells met them at a secure entrance, her expression serious but supportive. "Ready for this?" Rebecca nodded, squeezing Emma's hand. "As ready as we'll ever be." The press conference was held in a large auditorium filled with reporters, photographers, and federal officials. Rebecca took the podium with Emma at her side, looking out at the sea of faces and cameras. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "My name is Rebecca Morrison, 6 months ago, my husband, Captain James Morrison, died in what the Army classified as a training accident. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth about how he really died and why his death led to the exposure of a conspiracy that threatened our national security. She spoke for 20 minutes, outlining James's investigation, her own discovery of the evidence, and the events that had led to the destruction of Project Phoenix. Her voice remained calm and professional, but underneath lay the steel that had made her one of the Navy's most effective operators. When she finished, the questions came fast and relentless. "Mrs. Morrison, are you saying your husband was murdered by his own commanding officer?" "I'm saying the evidence clearly shows that Captain Morrison was killed to prevent him from exposing a weapons smuggling operation run by General Crawford and his civilian accomplices. What about your daughter? How has she been affected by these events?" Rebecca looked down at Emma, who had remained poised throughout the conference. "Emma is remarkably brave. She wants people to know that her father died serving his country, even if that service ultimately cost him his life." A reporter near the front raised her hand. "Emma, is there anything you'd like to tell people about your father?" Emma stepped closer to the microphone, her small voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "My dad was the best dad in the world. He taught me to be brave and to always tell the truth, even when it's scary. I miss him every day, but I'm proud that he tried to stop the bad men from hurting other soldiers." The room fell silent. The impact of a child's simple words more powerful than any political speech. "Are you afraid?" another reporter asked. "These are dangerous people you're exposing." Rebecca's expression hardened. "These people already took my husband from us. They threatened my daughter. I'm not afraid of them anymore. They should be afraid of me." Deal. The press conference concluded with Admiral Wells announcing the formation of a joint task force to investigate military procurement corruption. Rebecca and Emma were escorted to a private meeting with the president, who proved to be both genuinely sympathetic and genuinely angry about the betrayal of trust represented by Project Phoenix. "Mrs. Morrison," the president said, taking her hands in both of his, "I want you to know that this administration will spare no effort in bringing everyone responsible to justice. Your husband died serving his country, and his country won't forget that sacrifice." He knelt to Emma's level, his expression gentle. "Your daddy was a hero, Emma. Not because he died, but because he chose to do the right thing even when it was dangerous. You should be very proud of him." Emma nodded solemnly. "I am, Mr. President. And I'm proud of my mom, too. She stopped the bad men." The president glanced up at Rebecca with something like awe. "Yes, she certainly did." Over the following weeks, Rebecca and Emma appeared on news programs, testified before congressional committees, and met with military families affected by similar corruption. With each appearance, their story gained power and reach. Sterling, facing life imprisonment, provided testimony that implicated dozens of officials across multiple agencies. The scandal grew to encompass not just weapons trafficking, but systematic fraud in military contracts worth billions of dollars. 3 months after that October night in Hawthorne Valley, Rebecca stood in Arlington National Cemetery beside James's grave, Emma at her side, holding a bouquet of white roses. The headstone bore new words below his name: hero, patriot, father. His courage exposed corruption and protected his brothers in arms. "Do you think Dad can see what we did?" Emma asked, placing the flowers at the base of the headstone. Rebecca knelt beside her daughter. "I think he knows. And I think he's proud of us both." "Are we going to be okay, Mom? All the attention, the cameras, the people who don't like what we're saying." Rebecca considered the question seriously. The death threats had started almost immediately after their first press appearance. The security detail assigned to them was both necessary and constant. Their every move was scrutinized, criticized, analyzed. But Sterling was in federal prison. Crawford was dead. The conspiracy that had killed James was completely dismantled. And most importantly, no other military family would suffer what they had suffered. "We're going to be more than okay," Rebecca said finally. "We're going to build something good from all this pain. Maybe a foundation to help other military families, maybe advocacy work to prevent this kind of corruption. Whatever we choose, we'll choose it together." Emma nodded, tracing her father's name on the headstone with one small finger. "I think Dad would like that. He always said you were the one with all the good ideas." Rebecca laughed despite her tears. "He said that about me being a strategist, didn't he? All the time. He said you could solve any problem if you put your mind to it." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching other visitors move through the cemetery, each carrying their own burden of loss and love. "Mom?" Emma said finally. "Yes, sweetheart? Can we get that horse now? I think it would be nice to have something alive and happy around us for a change." Rebecca pulled her daughter close, feeling something like hope blooming in her chest for the first time in months. "You know what? I think that's exactly what we need." 6 months later, Rebecca Morrison stood on the front porch of their new home in Virginia, a farmhouse not unlike the one in Hawthorne Valley, but bigger, brighter, and most importantly theirs without reservation or fear. In the pasture beyond the house, Emma was teaching their new mare courage to respond to voice commands. The Morrison Foundation for Military Family Justice had opened offices in Washington, D.C., funded by Rebecca's book deal and speaking engagements. They provided legal assistance to service members facing retaliation for reporting corruption and support for families of personnel who died under suspicious circumstances. Tony Rodriguez served as the Foundation's Director of Investigations, his experience and network of contacts proving invaluable in identifying cases that needed attention. Sheriff Cross had taken early retirement and moved east to serve as their security consultant. Walter Hayes visited regularly, charming Emma with stories of his wartime service and providing Rebecca with the steady wisdom of someone who'd seen the best and worst of human nature. And every morning, Rebecca woke to the sound of Emma's laughter as she worked with her horse, the nightmares and hollow-eyed grief slowly replaced by the natural resilience of childhood given time and space to heal. They'd chosen visibility over hiding, justice over vengeance, purpose over bitterness. It hadn't been the quiet life Rebecca had originally sought for them, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a life that honored James's memory while building something positive from their shared loss. Standing on that porch in the Virginia sunshine, watching her daughter bloom into the strong, confident girl James had always believed she could become, Rebecca Morrison finally understood what victory looked like. It looked like Emma's smile as she hugged her horse. It looked like Tony's satisfaction when another corrupt official was arrested based on their foundation's investigation. It looked like the letters from military families thanking them for giving voice to concerns that had been ignored for too long. Most of all, it looked like waking up each morning without fear, knowing that the people who had destroyed their old life had been held accountable, and that the new life they'd built was worth the price they'd paid. James Morrison had died seeking truth and justice. His widow and daughter had found both, and in finding them, had found their way home. In the distance, a red-tailed hawk circled lazily in the afternoon sky, hunting with patient determination. Rebecca watched it for a moment, remembering another hawk in another sky over a Nebraska farm that had briefly been home. That farm was gone, sold to the state and turned into a memorial park. But the lessons learned there, about courage, about justice, about the price of truth, those traveled with them wherever they went. Emma's laughter echoed across the pasture as courage nuzzled her cheek, and Rebecca Morrison smiled, knowing that some things were worth any fight, any sacrifice, any price. Her family was one of those things, and they'd won.